Hi, my name is Christy, and this podcast is my pursuit to glean practical wisdom on femininity, homemaking, finances, and relationships from the God-fearing women in my life. Hope you enjoy this journey with me as we learn to smile at the future. Now let's dive right in. Hi ladies, and welcome to episode number 7. 7 is my favorite number, and today I have a wonderful conversation to share with you that's a little bit countercultural, and it's on the topic of living with your parents as an adult woman. So there are different angles to looking at this topic, but not a lot of resources out there on maybe the benefits of living with your parents as an adult. And so I wanted to kind of address that from that angle, and I'm happy to share the conversation with you. There are some nuances that we will cover, but I hope that it will give you kind of a fresh perspective on this topic. And today I'm going to be interviewing Rachelle Talley. She is married and a mother of 3 kiddos, and she is my sister's best friend, which meant that I grew up just respecting and admiring her as well. She's talented, godly, and she has lived with her parents for a time in her single years. So she does come to the table with advice and tips from her own experiences. I'm thrilled to share the conversation with you today, and in turn, I hope you will share it with someone else. So let's jump right into this and get started. Okay, hello ladies. I'm excited about the topic today because I know it will be helpful. There are hardly any resources out there for Christian single ladies on this topic of living with your parents. I did some Google searches today and came up almost empty-handed. I found a lot of articles for parents that had adult children living with them, but none for the children. So I'm excited today to talk about this and hash it out. And I'm also excited because of the wonderful and wise lady that I'm interviewing named Rachelle Talley. So welcome aboard, Rachelle.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you for saying yes to being on here. And I know this is just something that I think we both have lived with our parents, and so common ground there. And that's why I wanted to invite you on to share a little bit today. But before we get into a lot of our questions here that we're going to go over, I think we need to discuss who would be the right candidate and situation for living with your parents. There are some instances where this is not ideal. Rachelle, if you want to just speak a little bit to that and what would be the right situation to be considering this.
Sure, yeah. I wanted to talk about that first because I don't want anyone to think that we're saying this is what everybody needs to do or even should do, but it is something that can be a great situation. Some things to think about would be, are your parents believers? I wouldn't say that's a deal breaker, but first, are they believers or not? And if they are believers, are they committed to following Christ, and will they support your biblical decisions? I know there are some, Christian parents or people who say they're Christians who may or may not be exactly supporting what you're trying to do. If your parents are not believers, are they supportive of your biblical decisions? Because there's honestly some really good parents out there that aren't believers, but they're good at being parents and they're supportive. That could really be a good situation as far as your witness to them, if they're supportive and if they're not distracting you and pulling you away, but they're saying, okay, these are good things in your life and we support it. So I think it's possible to have a healthy living situation with your non-believing parents, but something to think about. And another question to ask would just be, are your parents able to understand the boundaries of having an adult child living in their home? And, are you able to understand that as well, like the boundaries for yourself as their child? So if you're not sure, I would definitely recommend talking to a mentor that you have in your life and maybe ask them to kind of walk through that with you and talk about your concerns and get some kind of perspective. Sometimes it can be hard to have the right perspective. We're so close with our family, so it can be helpful. Obviously, if there's any major red flags, talk to someone about that. And just to throw that out there, just because they're your parents doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be the right fit for that. But if they are, it can be a great situation.
Yeah. No, I think that's really key that you brought that out. I think we hear a lot about the negatives of living at home and just in a culture that celebrates independence, being that type of go-getter woman. I very rarely hear the positives of living at home as a woman. I think I want to specify that. I think that is a crucial distinction. I think men do need to be establishing themselves in their career. I guess from your perspective, what would you say are benefits for a woman to be considering living at home?
There's a lot of benefits. So these are in no particular order, but wisdom from your parents, being spiritual, if they're believers and they're wise, or even just practical guidance. A lot of times you try to sit down and say, I want to glean your wisdom at this official lunch. But okay, you may or may not get some good tidbits there. But when you live in proximity, it's just day-to-day stuff. So you're picking up the wisdom that your parents can offer, spiritual and even just practical. Like I said, even if they're not believers, there's still a lot of great things that parents can be passing down. And so you can kind of extend that time of being able to get that wisdom from them. Another one can be companionship. If you enjoy your parents and if they enjoy you, that can be really fun to have them around and enjoy them. I was thinking a lot of these benefits are kind of mutual. It can be a blessing to your parents too, for them to have your companionship. Safety and protection for women is, living with your parents is a big deterrent to predators, to be honest. Guys who are looking to take advantage of a woman are going to think twice, 3, 4 times before if she's living with her parents. And then financial savings, it depends on the situation you have with your parents, whether or not they may be charging you rent, they may be charging you lower rent or no rent, just depending on what you guys work out, but definitely can be a financial savings. I would say in most situations, it's probably going to be some kind of savings because they probably own their home. Or anyway, and then sharing the load, just sharing the load of the chores and the burdens of daily life, taking turns cooking and things that, again, can be blessings on both sides. So those were just a few off the top of my head. I thought there's a lot of benefits, but
yeah, I thought of a few too, and you had a lot of the same ones. I had, just the companionship, company. It's not as lonely when there's people you can talk to. And usually your parents, want to hear what you have to say and they want to hear about your day. And whereas a roommate might not be as invested in your day-to-day life. I think accountability too, just not, loneliness can breed sin and selfishness. So having the extra accountability layer there, stability, with roommates, that's kind of, you never know when someone's going to move somewhere else or get married, or there's just a lot of change. Your parents it's a little more of a stable living situation. They're not necessarily going to just up and move probably anytime soon. So that's kind of nice to have that stability as well. I feel like every year, most of my friends have to move or find a new living situation because of the rotating door of roommates.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. I remember that and thinking that was kind of scary to me. I was like, oh man, I don't like that feeling of, oh no.
Yeah. And your parents already they know you, they know your quirks and everything about you. And so there's not this learning curve of adapting to your personality and, sometimes the conflict that can come from that if you're living with roommates. But a lot of benefits that can happen. Going back to that independence, we want to be independent and responsible. I think that's the key word there. We want to be responsible women. So how can a woman, if she wants to demonstrate that for herself, her parents, friends, are there other ways that she can be independent other than moving out of her parents' home? Definitely.
So I think, like you said, being responsible. So doing what you need to do without being asked or reminded is a big one. The Bible talks a lot about this in Proverbs, right? Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise without having a captain or overseer, stores up food in the summer. So being an adult is you do what you need to do because you're an adult. Then you do it because you're supposed to, not because your mom and dad told you to do it. So if you're living in your mom and dad's home, make sure they're not still having to have that role for you, but that, you're doing it. And I would say contribute to the home as you would if you lived in a non-family situation. So things that your roommates wouldn't put up with, don't expect your parents to put up with that, right? Just because they're your parents, you might be tempted to take advantage of that maybe, or not even on purpose, just kind of like that natural, oh, I'm home, I'm with my parents, but would I be, doing this if I lived with roommates, or would my roommates be kind of having to have a talk with me, right? So making sure that you're doing what you would do in any household, not just people who are related to you. Would you expect your roommate to do the chores and all the cooking and doing, obviously those would be things that if you didn't live at home. So make sure you're just kind of thinking about those kind of things. Another thing is be hospitable. The Bible talks about being hospitable in 1 Timothy 5:10. We're told to be hospitable throughout the Bible. So sometimes that may mean you're going to have people into the home you live in, your parents' home, if they're open to that. If not, there's other ways you can be hospitable. Well, it means to be welcoming and to be serving and to take people out for coffee or meals. Do the hospitable things with what you have. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a full house and a full this, and those aren't requirements to be hospitable. So do those things. And then I would say cook for your parents and yourself at home. Make sure you're doing that and not just once in a while doing it. Do the big chores, right? Not just the little ones. So make sure you're doing the things that are maybe bigger projects, harder things to do, not just like, oh, I have a little checklist that I do, but kind of look for, hey, if I was a homeowner, right? Or if I was responsible for a home, who would be the one that would be taking care of, X, Y, and Z? And I don't mean you have to do like the manly stuff necessarily. I mean, if you want to, but like, don't, do the spring cleaning, right? Not just the dusting, like, or whatever. So those are just some things I was thinking of that you could be independent in a way, be generous with what you have, because I think that, if you're living at home to save money, it can be easy to change, to go from saving mode to like miser mode, right? And like, I'm scrimping everything now and I'm saving for my future and for me and it's a blessing if your parents are helping you financially, but make sure that you're still thinking about, how do I envision dealing with money in the future, right? How do I envision, if I do have my own home one day, if I do get married one day, what kind of person do I want to be with my money? Do I want to be a saver? And do I want to be generous? I should do those things now. So I shouldn't be being like, oh, I'm single, I can spend money on clothes. Sure, I can, but should I? So kind of thinking about it in those terms, I guess. What does God say about money, right? And what principles am I using now? Am I saving and tithing and giving? Not just the bare minimum, but like, what else can I be doing with my money? Saving is a really good thing. I encourage it, but also make sure, I know that for my own self, I can tend to be a little bit of a hoarder. Get into that mode and be like, but this person, and so I guess that's a way to show independence, is even if you're not paying a lot of bills, even if you're not paying rent to them, you can still be, trying to make wise financial decisions and think about the future.
Yeah. I think if parents are worried about bailing you out all the time or worried about your finances, that's not going to be a blessing to them if you're home. Being independent in that way, being able to pay your own bills, your own insurance, pay rent if they, or even, I would even offer to pay rent if you're an adult woman. And, because you're using electricity and water and all of the things that they're paying for, showing your parents that I could be doing this on my own in another location, but I'm choosing to be home for whatever your reasons are, but giving them that peace of mind that you'll be okay even if you don't live with them, and that you're thinking through those things and being responsible with finances.
Exactly. And that's a good point. I did when I lived here. I was like, I want to pay rent. My parents were like, you don't need to. And I was like, but I want to, because it just felt right to me to do that. It wasn't a lot, but it was something, because I wanted to make sure my heart was not just being like, oh, I'm just going to take advantage.
I feel like paying rent would be more for our benefit than our parents' benefit. Yes, it'll help them out financially, but getting into that mindset of being responsible with our money, I think it's more of a benefit for the person staying there. Can you walk us through a little bit about how the different seasons you lived at home, and maybe when you moved out, and kind of how you thought through when it was right for a change like that?
Sure, yeah. So I lived in this particular house for like 20 years. I was 8 when we moved in. I was 28 when I moved out, but I lived with them obviously in the other house until I was 8. I went to college and came back. So I would go away for short amounts of time, college, came back, and then taught school in Columbia for a little while and then came back. So, but I kind of stayed there till I was 28. We just had a good relationship. My parents were really just a huge blessing to me, and it was great living there. They were good at trusting me and giving me freedom and all that kind of stuff. So there was a good rapport there. I think one of the catalysts for me moving out was I had 4 younger brothers still living at home, and they were mostly teens, early 20s. And I found myself struggling with my role as their sister and sort of feeling like another parent to them. It's just not the role I wanted to have in their life. They would just be up late, goofing around, doing whatever. And I kind of felt like I had to tell them to stop, or I'd have to tell my parents if I saw something, and not trying to My brothers were not bad boys or anything like that. They just, they were just goofballs and sometimes just did dumb stuff or whatever, irresponsible. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to know what you're doing. I just don't even want like, I want to just be your big sister and like hang out sometimes with you and have just more of a brother-sister relationship and not feel like I'm a parent. And honestly, I'd be trying to sleep and go to work the next day and they'd be up making noise with their friend, whatever. So, so in that sense, I felt like it'd be nice to, give them space too. Like, hey, they're teens in this house and let my parents deal with them how they want to deal with them. So that was part of it. Another reason was I really just was starting to feel drawn toward wanting to kind of have my own nest a little bit. And because it was so many, and my mom was great. She's like, have people over, do whatever you want. But I kind of just wanted my own I can have people to my place. And I wanted to host Bible studies and have women over and do things like that. And, I had the desire in my heart to be a homemaker. And I think you can do that in your parents' home. But that was just another, kind of ring, I guess, step on the ladder that was kind of leading me toward well, maybe it's time. And I actually still lived with my sister at that time for part of the time when my brothers moved in with us for a while. And I lived 10 minutes away from my parents. So I still had a lot of the benefits of living really close to them. That was a huge blessing. I didn't really feel like I was moving out so much as we actually called it the Willis Annex. Because yes, we still had a lot of the same, benefits of that. Another thing was I was thinking about the money I was saving because my parents, like I said, they weren't really charging me much. And I thought I kind of wanted to invest in something. And so I decided maybe I would invest in a condo, which ended up being a terrible idea because the year I bought it was the year that the whole housing market crashed. But I held on to that thing for 10 years and then got married and we sold it. Anyway, so it worked out okay in the end. But it was that really was not a great investment. But I think normally real estate is a good investment, especially in Southern California. But I happened to just get the wrong moment there. But there was a lot of learning and faith exercises for me in that time period, actually, for sure. I think God really used that for me. So that was part of my reasoning, too, was I felt like I wanted to buy something and invest in something for the future. So it did. It provided a home for me and for some of my siblings for 10 years. And even my first daughter was born there. So thankfully the Lord provided and I didn't lose it or anything like that. But it didn't really end up, making me money or anything like that. But
I think going back to if you're moving back into your parents' house to save money, and maybe it's a temporary thing, making sure that your parents know that, or maybe you've moved out, maybe you're moving back in, and keeping them on the same page of okay, these are my reasons. My game plan is to move out in 1 year and have saved this amount of money. Being very clear that it's not just failure to launch or whatever the phrase is, but that they know that you're being responsible with that as well. And and you are genuinely wanting to save money. But that doesn't mean once again, you would hopefully pay rent or help pay expenses, but it would definitely be cheaper to live at home than to live on your own with roommates. And probably one of the harder things to navigate when you're living at home as an adult is trying to communicate that to your parents that, yes, I'm an independent adult. I'm not a teenager anymore, but doing that in a loving way that you want to be a blessing to them. You want to, care for them in that way, but you also want to be independent. So how do you navigate that type of a conversation? Is that something you ever had to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I liked the question you wrote to me was, how should she communicate that she wants to be a blessing to her parents, but still live as an adult and retain a certain level of independence? And so I said, I think she should fix her parents a nice meal or coffee and dessert, sit down and have a frank conversation using your exact words. We're like, yeah, I would like to be a blessing here, but I'd like to be an adult and live with a certain level of independence. How does that sound to you, mom and dad, right? And what would that look like to you? So ask them, if I did live here, what would you want from me? What would help you? And then let them know kind of what you're thinking. So I was talking to my mom about this today, and she said that sometimes you might say you were going to be home around 11. And then if you weren't home and maybe you got home at 1, she's like, I don't care what time you got home, but I would be worried. So for her, just communicating that would help her. And so you kind of need to find out from your parents, what helps them. So my mom's like, I know that you're not out of doing it to trouble, and you're responsible and you're going to do what you need to do. But I just want to know that you're not, dead somewhere or dying on the side of the road. All the things moms imagine are happening to their kids. for her, that was a big thing. So just communicate with her about where you're at and what, if you're going to be late, let her know, that kind of thing. So not because she wanted to parent me per se, just because. And when I didn't live at home anymore, it was like, okay, she never worried about it because she had no idea. But when you live in their home, they feel a little bit more like they feel a little bit more responsible, I guess, and kind of like they know when you're supposed to be home. So then they kind of feel like that knowledge makes them responsible. So they feel a little bit more worried. Yeah, I think if you really just have an official conversation, I mean, every family is a little different, but I think it might be nice to just set some time aside and like do something to serve them. And then that act itself can show them what your intentions are. You're serious, you're an adult now, and you're acting like one, and you want to be treated like one, but you want to bless them too. And there's a lot of verses in the Bible about respecting your parents. Even doesn't say children, it just says, and like Proverbs 23:22 says, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Sometimes as adults, we can grow and we start to go, oh, I wouldn't do things that way. And we can get maybe a little bit of an attitude. Or even if you are having unbelieving parents, or maybe parents that you don't think are necessarily as spiritually mature as the ways that you're growing in, it might be easy to sometimes look down on them a little bit or something. So just keeping that respect of like, you brought me into this world and you put a lot of time into me, and your parents, they deserve our respect, even if we don't agree with everything they've ever done. So just having that respectful attitude and letting them, just being open and honest with them like an adult should do, right? What would you like from me? Do you want communication? Do you want to know what I'm doing? Do you not want to know what I'm doing? What would help? What would not help? What are some ways I can help around the house? And then you can kind of let them know, I would like to be able to kind of do X, Y, Z, and not feel like I need to check in with you all the time, or whatever that is for you. I honestly didn't need to have this conversation with my parents because they're naturally just really good at that. I think your parents too. It was kind of a natural transition. From what I've talked with Michelle, I think over the years, it seems like it's, they kind of always planned on us becoming adults, and they were happy to have us around, but they knew they did a good job of transitioning that. So we didn't really need to have that conversation, but, I tried to check in with them, not just have that conversation once, but, after a couple of months, how's this working out? Like, are we still, is there anything you want to change? Is there anything that you're realizing now? Oh, I should have asked you to do this, or I feel like this, just kind of keep those lines of communication open. That way they feel like they have a place to tell you these things without having to bring it up awkwardly or anything like that, or harbor any kind of resentment or feel like they can't do things in their own home, So just making sure that is there.
So many helpful tips. I think one thing I tended to do would be just kind of come home to roost. You come home, you're late, you get up early, you're working, you're doing evening events and things. You can feel really disengaged from your parents when you're just treating the home like that. And I think that needs to be something that you're thinking about, is these aren't just roommates, and if you're putting all the expectation on them to do all the holding down of the fort so you could just live your life with no responsibility and, total freedom, I think that's unwise. And I think they're going to see that too. But like planning into your schedule, like, a time just to sit and talk with your mom or dad or whoever is more the conversationalist in your family, like spending quality time with them, planning it into your day. And the same with like helping out around the house. Bigger jobs take more time. And then I was thinking another way to show respect, and we do this with everybody else, but it seems like with our family, we just kind of disregard what they say, or, we just totally sometimes are not as polite and kind. But if they have a certain way that they like something done, and I know around our house, this is going to sound silly, but my mom likes our dishwasher loaded in a certain way. Well, I tend to just do it my way. And she often has to come behind me and redo it and rinse the dishes again. And so I was just thinking about that today. Like, that's so rude. I'm just willfully sticking to my choice and my way of doing it without any regard with, she tells me it almost every day. And if somebody else that I wasn't related to had asked me that, I would be vigilant to like be very careful about their requests and do it exactly how they wanted it. So just giving your parents common courtesy. I think another area that I've just in my own life, once again, just with how much I use technology, remembering that my mom, she's in her early 70s. She didn't grow up with her phone and internet and Facebook and all of that at easy access. And so we're in the same room and I'm doing what I'm doing and she's just sitting there, just realizing, just because I'm at home, that doesn't make it okay. I'm giving undivided attention still. And if I have to work on my phone or laptop, going in my room, doing it separately, but not that kind of in your face.
Yeah, or even just communicating that, because even I sometimes get annoyed with my husband for that. Because I look around and I'm like, I hate seeing everyone's faces in their phones all the time. It drives me nuts. And, or even like, back in the old days, if your phone rang, you had to answer it. And usually you'd hang up and you go, oh, that was so-and-so. But like, you can have all these conversations going on in your quietness of your phone and another person's sitting in the room like, hello, like, what are you doing? So I think that's a good point. And I think if someone just tells you, oh, I'm just sending a quick text to this person. Oh, okay, that's totally fine with me. I just don't like being ignored, So I think that's good with your parents too. Or if you have to work, hey, mom and dad, I'm just going to work on my laptop here, but I want to hang out with you guys. Is this all right if I just, sometimes it's nice to be in the same room with people. And I don't think they mind if you tell them what you're doing. But if you're just kind of in there like constantly on your phone, they don't know why. You could see how that could get frustrating. Not trying to throw my husband under the bus because plenty of stuff that he doesn't like. Trust me.
Oh, I'm sure this is a common conversation with almost every couple, just the phone usage. But yeah. And I think maybe just being careful of making it a habit. And another thing I was thinking about too is just expressing gratitude and not thinking, that living at your parents' home is something that they owe you or that is normal. Regularly thanking them for that and finding ways to express that, taking them out to dinner. Can't really do that right now.
I know my mom loves to go out to lunch. She used to love to go shopping and out to lunch. That was like her favorite thing to do. And so a couple of months ago, I said, hey, mom, let's order food and pick it up. And then let's eat it on the patio and just sit together, eat it. Go out to lunch. Like it's just pretend we're out to lunch. So you can get creative too. And just, sometimes it's hard to sit down and make ourselves do those things when we are just home.
We kind of talked about this being a part of the team, being part of the home, but also not being lazy. So really guarding against laziness and slothfulness. God didn't wire me that way. If anything, I have to tell myself to slow down. It's not just my natural bent. But yeah, I think for maybe other people listening in, just when you're home and with your parents, don't be a teenage version of yourself. You are an adult.
Yes. And, you might have a really sweet and kind, generous mom who does things for you and tells you, no, it's okay. I like doing it. Doesn't matter. Do it anyway, because you're a grown up. I think that sometimes moms have a hard time getting out of mom mode, or even dads. Dads do stuff too. Sometimes that's kind of you, but or if they insist, find some other way to do something. I guess I'm just saying, just because your parents are nice doesn't mean
don't take advantage of it. It's more for you're benefiting yourself when you take responsibility. It's not just for them. I think we tend to think that, if they want to do it, okay, I'll let them do it. But you have one less opportunity to learn how to do something yourself, or being comfortable doing it on a regular basis and forming a habit that's good for you to do. Finding maybe there's certain one thing that your mom likes to do, but if she's doing everything for you, your laundry, your meals, don't fall into that trap. And the scripture I have to say it because it is the most well-known scripture passage on honoring your parents. But Ephesians 6:2-3, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And how clear that is. And there's so many proverbs. Rachelle, you mentioned a few of how important and what God thinks of us honoring our parents. And I think it was a good point that you brought out. This isn't defined by age. It's not just when you're, a youngster and in school, but this is a lifelong command. And I think you can have a real upfront and personal way to demonstrate that when you are living with them in the home and how you live your life. If they're unbelieving, what a testimony to live that way before them. So
something my mom would always say to me that I've seen to be so true was basically, you're going to be the same. If you get married, you're going to be the same person when you get married that you are now. So if you're discontent now, you're going to be discontent then. If you have fears or worries about your future, or if you compare yourself with others, you're still going to do those things married. I think we tend to think, oh, well, these things will go away once I'm married. If that's something you desire, right? I have the object of my desire, I'm married, or I have kids, or whatever it is. And it's actually not true. You're still you, you're still you. You're going to grow, of course, but you're still the same person. And so you're going to bring those things with you into your marriage and motherhood and whatever path God takes you on. You're taking that all with you. And so, if anything, motherhood and marriage amplify those things, kind of bring them up even stronger sometimes. That's just my encouragement, is to do the spiritual work needed now and recognize that God will use whatever circumstances you're in, single or married, right? Male or female, whether I'm in want or in plenty, whatever circumstances you're in, God's going to grow you and make you into the woman he made you to be and to glorify him. And so just try not to put those things off, those hard works sometimes of dealing with our inner struggles, and work on them now, because then, you'll have a lot more practice. And when they do crop up later in a different circumstance, whether, that's marriage or whether it's becoming a mom or, moving out on your own and buying a house and having the economy crash or whatever it is, like, you'll have practice in dealing with those things, and you'll have that just relationship with the Lord that will carry you through those trials. I'm not sure if that made sense, but
no, it did. And I think our poor parents that have to deal with the brunt of the sharpening that comes in our lives, and how we should really thank them that they have been such instruments of change and growth in us. And that's such a good point. And I was actually going to ask you, if you could say one thing to single women on any topic, what would it be?
I hope that, it encouraged somebody, and I hope it encouraged you, and just sounds like you're doing all the right things too already, but hopefully it just encouraged you to excel still more. I think this is great that you brought this up, because I think there's kind of a little bit of a stigma sometimes for people about living at home. And so I think it is helpful if we talk about it and encourage that if it's the right circumstances, and if this is something God's putting on your heart to do and you are seeking wisdom, it can be a really wonderful thing to do.
Yes, it can. I appreciate your wisdom on that, Rachelle, and how you have lived that as well. And I'm sure we're such a blessing to your parents and continue to be.